Welcome. This is Build Visions for Africa, presenting the impact of climate change on Africa. Increasing temperatures, rising sea levels, changing precipitation or rainfall patterns, more extreme global weather, climate change is hitting Africa hard. Desertification is a result, drought is increasing, rising sea level affecting flooding, impact on livelihoods is immense. The environment is changing. African countries are most at risk of the adverse effects of climate change. The continent is suffering the most from the climate crisis. The current and the future impact of climate change is unlikely going to be extreme in the Africa region. The emphasis is now, and it cannot be overemphasized. Climate change is a threat to the survival of the African continent as it impacts pose a threat to human wealth, human health, food and water security, as well as social economic development in the region. Africa is still largely agrarian economy based on a diverse landmass with wide climate variations. In West and Central Africa, 45% of farmers have experienced an increase in crop failure. 38% have seen a decrease in their farm income. 17% have observed a reduction in the availability of water for irrigation, and 13% of families have seen at least one of their family members or relatives forced to migrate. An adverse effect on weather, land, air, and livelihoods becomes a security risk in itself. Climate change affected by human drivers such as mining and deforestation risk changing the ecosystem completely. For instance, Ghana, sitting at the intersection of three hydroclimate zones, the impact is huge. Changes in rainfall pattern, weather condition, and sea level rises affect the coastal lands and is expected to affect farming and fisheries adversely. Currently, hydroelectric power is being affected in Ghana, and electrical cuts has come to stay. In Kenya, in the Kenyan Rift Valley, lakes burst their banks, forcing residents to move out. Schools had to close, hotels shut down, roads and bridges and farms were submerged completely, with obvious economic consequences. The increasing frequency of violent tropical cyclones in the Indian Ocean adversely affects countries such as Mozambique and Malawi. How does climate change impact conflict? Direct resources competition, where climate change results in scarcity or abundance of a specific natural resource, is one. Increased grievances over relative deprivation, where climate change induced resource scarcity or abundance lead to changes in relative prosperity that can reinforce existing feelings of grievances or mistrust between groups. So communities are plunged into a cycle of suspicion, fear, which perpetuates and drives conflict. There's also complexities or complex crisis and human insecurity in which climate change contributes to or intensifies natural disasters such as floods or droughts, which can also affect socioeconomic issues. So we see that climate change has direct impact on conflict. Countries and regions mostly likely to be impacted adversely or plunge into armed conflict, insecurities associated with environmental stresses are already fragile countries which have inadequate or lack the capacity and strong institutions to manage their vulnerabilities and maintain law and order, which further pushes the conflict and confusion drive, and people live in destabilized conditions. As climate change impacts the physical landscape and changes the geopolitical structure, conflicts therefore increase due to limited resources, as has been said already. For instance, drought-led increased competition for diminishing fertile lands, the rising sea level forcing coastal dwellers to move inland further adds pressure to the increasing scarce land and water resources, increasing the potential for conflict. Also, diminishing fertile lands increase farmer to farmer and farmer to herder tensions. So, for instance, in places like Ghana, there's always conflict between the Fulani herdsmen grazing their cattle over other people's farmlands, and sometimes it can escalate to serious conflict from tension. For instance, Lake Chad, once the world's sixth largest freshwater lake, has its water shrunk to less than 10% of the capacity as at 1983 by the year 2000, and it keeps shrinking, which is a disastrous condition. A reduction in the waters of Lake Chad, bordering Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria, has devastating social and economic consequences for these countries. Arguably, I dare to say that insecurities involving the emergence of Boko Haram and related conflicts has a link to this situation. A conflict without borders continue to play in the Sahel region of Africa. In Limpato, in Limtapo Goman region, including Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, the place has heightened security situations and deteriorating humanitarian crisis where people are always on the move in search of safety. So these geographic areas has tensions and conflict and insecurities due to stresses of environmental issues that directly comes from climate change. Competing market forces therefore lead to increased prices, generating conflict between supply and demand, potentially accounting for political tensions and conflict in resource scarce parts of Africa, most affected by drought and failed agriculture. We must envision the future by supporting and strengthening social and political institutions to address conflict through community led early warning systems and dispute resolution mechanism to avoid violent conflicts. And it should be community led because it should be tailored to the people considering their culture and their sensitivities. African governments are urged as a matter of urgency to prioritize and regard climate change as a sustainable development issue that needs urgent attention. It is therefore imperative to design climate change or climate adaptive mitigation programs to avoid exacerbating existing conflicts as a critical first step in climate related programs. The African Union and all Pan African investors should plan and invest in ways to mitigate the impact of climate change whilst being business focused. That is, having the bottom line in mind. There should be increased efforts towards developing adaptive capacity to mechanize agric, which is which has a huge business potential in my view. Mechanized agric should be tailored to African terrain. It's not all industrial equipment developed for the West that can work for Africa. Therefore, research should be put in to do adaptive mechanization for the African continent. African leadership should show more political will to manage the consequences of all adverse effects of climate change and the inherent vulnerabilities that comes with it. Investment in Africa should be directed at transforming Africans' agriculture for shared prosperity, improve livelihoods through harnessing opportunities for inclusive growth and sustainable development. Africa can realize its Agenda 2063 much better when the impact of climate change is well mitigated. Africa needs to have and implement strategies for adaptation. The time to act is now. Let's build the Africa we want. Please get involved. Be a change advocate. This has been Build Visions for Africa. Remember, we all live in a one Africa ecosystem and our lives are interrelated and combined. Conflict in a part of Africa increases tension and destabilization in another part due to crisis of relocation and refugee problem. Please like this channel, subscribe and share. Thank you.